Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1019A, and today's date is July 11th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Tax Collection Numbers for June Show the Economy is Not Improving. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we see the central bankers, the U.S. government, they're continually trying to keep this market alive. The high-frequency traders, the plunge protection team, they're doing whatever they possibly can to keep the stock market up. They want all eyes on that. And they're going to push this as high as they possibly can right to the very end. We see gold is still holding its own, and most likely we're going to see it rise once again. And we've been talking about how the American person, the 26 million people who don't have the full-time, high-paying job, how they just can't go out and they just can't shop right now because they have 2, 3, maybe 4 part-time jobs, and they're not making anywhere what they made before. And this is a problem. Now, of course, the U.S. government central bankers are trying to convince us that unemployment is fantastic. Yes, it creeped up to 4.9%, but we're almost there at full employment. Well, we know retail is contracting at this point, and we talked about the restaurant performance index once before, and we realize that restaurants aren't doing as well either. Because what happens is more and more people lose their jobs, and either they can't find one or they have to get 2, 3 part-time jobs. They cut out restaurants too. It takes a little bit longer to show up, but we are seeing it now. The National Restaurant Association's Restaurant Performance Index shows a troubling picture. Restaurant sales softened in May, along with operator expectations as the industry continued its choppy 2016. The monthly indication of the health of the industry fell by 0.9% to 100.6 in May from 101.6 in April. So what we're seeing right now is traffic is falling. The latest data, which is coming from Bank of America, is disturbing because unlike the government data, even the NRAs, and that's not the National Rifle Association, that's the National Restaurant Association, what we're seeing is the government data and Bank of America, well, they're showing two different things. And what Bank of America data is showing is that sales and guest counts in June, they have been tumbling to new multi-year lows. In fact, as of June, the number of guest counts was the worst since February of 2013. Sales and guest counts in June set multi-year lows, and they were down by 5.9% on a 2-year basis. So what we're seeing right now, this is spreading, and it's spreading to the restaurants. We already know it's in retail because we see stores closing, we see it contracting, we see people being laid off. But of course, we have the U.S. government central bankers out there trying to convince us that everything is just fine. Look at our unemployment numbers. Look at the stock market soar after the jobs report comes out. But what we're seeing right now, and this is coming from the Fed's Labor Market Condition Index, this has tumbled for 6 straight months. It tumbled to 1.9% in June, worse than expected, and it's not getting better. So when we look at the job numbers, we know that in June, the U.S. roared back and it gained 287,000 new jobs. But if we look past all of that, past what the BLS is telling us, we see something completely different, because when we look at the Treasury tax collection data, we see that the economy is not doing as well as the government would like us to think. Corporate tax collections of $224 billion over the last 9 months, they were down $32 billion or 12.5% from the previous year. So those don't fit any type of rebound narrative. The tax collection numbers for June are nothing short of a disaster. Withholding tax collections hit the flat line in June, coming in at $180.6 billion compared to $180 billion last June. That's not a roaring job market. That's a 0.3% rounding error. Non-withheld taxes in June, which reflect bonuses, estimated payments for anticipated earnings, dropped from $76.7 billion last year to $62.3 billion this year. That's a 19% plunge, and that's not a rounding error. Corporate tax collections in June dropped from $74.9 billion last year to $62.8 billion this year, 16.2% drop. So when we look at this, this tells us, and these are the facts, that the economy is not doing what the government is telling us it is doing. The job numbers that they're continually telling us are incredible. They're not. Remember how they calculate them. 1, 2, 3 part-time jobs. That's counted as 1, 2, 3 full-time jobs. Those people who aren't looking, but still want a job, but haven't been on an interview. They're just not counted. They still want a job, but guess what? We don't think they want it. Just like the government tells us that people just don't want to shop now. No, they don't want to shop now because they don't have the money. And we've been looking at all of these facts over this entire time. Each time the government comes out or the Fed comes out with something, we look through the propaganda and we go to the heart of the matter. Things they really can't manipulate. And this is a problem. Because as we look at this, we can see that the economy, the job numbers, GDP, retail, manufacturing, it is not doing what they're trying to convince us of. It is not recovering. There is no rebound. Actually, everything's going in the opposite direction. When we look at the St. Louis Fed is showing us that we're drifting back into yet another banking crisis. We're seeing yield curves. Well, they're looking like 2007. When we look at credit quality, we see we're heading back to 2007. When we look at delinquencies on all loans and leases, we have a major problem just like 2007 going into 2008. So when we look at this, we see that we're heading in the same exact direction. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. Now we know Bernanke went out to Japan, meeting with Kuroda, meeting with Abe, and we knew they were going to do something with helicopter money. Well, it looks like they started. Because overnight, we see there was the first light instance of helicopter money. And what they're doing right now is they're using $100 billion fiscal expansion coming out of Japan. It comes in conjunction with an imminent expansion of even more monetary stimulus. The Bank of Japan is set to announce an expansion of its monthly bond and equity purchase on July 29th, and Abe will probably introduce fiscal stimulus by year end. So, is this the start of helicopter money? Yes, it appears so. Now, what the central bankers look like what they're doing right now is they're using Japan as a trial balloon for the rest of the world. If it works, guess what? We're going to see this spread to other countries. Now, we've seen this before with the bail-in documents. They used Cyprus. Did it work? Did people complain? Were they able to take the money from the people? Yes, they were. And then all of a sudden we saw Europe get bail-in documents, Canada, New Zealand, the United States, the UK. Now everyone's set up for bail-ins. And we can see what they're doing is they're getting prepared for this system to come down. And the central bankers, they're using whatever they have left to keep this system operational until they can get this war started. David Cameron, he announced that he's going to resign on Wednesday. Looks like Theresa May will be the next prime minister. And she might have the task of triggering Article 50. But there might be a problem, because there's more than 1,000 prominent British lawyers that have signed a letter urging Prime Minister David Cameron to allow Parliament to decide whether the United Kingdom should leave the European Union. And they're saying that they should take away the process of triggering Article 50 away from the Prime Minister and put it into the hands of Parliament, because what they're trying to say is that this whole Brexit referendum was done on misrepresentations of fact and promises that could never be delivered. And there must be a free vote in Parliament before the normal EU divorce procedure is triggered by invoking Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty. So they're already making preparations to try to stop this. Now, I believe what this whole process was to let air out of the bubble, allow the central banks to do things they normally wouldn't be able to do without having some type of incredible explanation. Instead, they can just say, Brexit, that's why we're bailing out these banks. Brexit, this is why we're creating more currency. Brexit, this is why we're trying helicopter money. And they're using all of this right now to keep the system alive. We see the IMF is cutting the 2016 growth down to 1.6% because of the Brexit. And they're already saying in 2017 it's going to be 1.4% or lower for Europe. And we can see already they're blaming everything on the Brexit. We know this is not the fact. We know that we were headed in this direction way before this. The economies were limping along. Europe was in a recession. Actually, most likely, most of the countries were in a depression. The United States is completely manipulated. It's a gigantic illusion. We're already in that recession, teetering on that depression. But of course, what they're doing is they're trying to make all these excuses. We see Deutsche Bank's chief economist. He's calling for a 150 billion euro bailout for the European banks. We need to do this because the European banks are seriously ill. And we need to address this problem very, very quickly before all the banks crash. Well, they've been ill for a long time. And of course, these are all the banks that passed the stress tests. We know these stress tests were fake, phony, and false. All the banks are insolvent. They've been propped up with all of this stimulus. And we know for a fact that all the banks, they're in trouble. They're going to need bail-ins, bailouts, because when this economy comes down, it's going to be a disaster, and it will be a chain reaction, and the whole system is going to freeze up. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.